Sabrina. I'll be your AI co-host for today. To truly grasp the story we're about to hear, we'll have to set aside centuries, indeed millennia, of conditioning that limits our beliefs to a steel-clad box of specific narratives. We'll have to burst the box and expose ourselves to the possibility of an existence as big as and as amazing as the universe itself. An existence that, amongst other things, includes sentient beings from other planets. With these allowances and the work of Zecharia Sitchin, we can confidently journey through a most magnificent story of us.
Thank you, Sabrina, and thank all of you for dropping in. If you're a first-timer, welcome. Hope you stick around. My name is Clay, and today we continue our look into the ancient past through 21st century eyes. Well, we've reached that inevitable place where we are now flying deep into a space that is genuinely sensitive to a large portion of society. For that reason, I've chosen to distribute this series of videos through subscribership and voluntary notification only. In other words, please subscribe or hit the notification bell. For now, I won't be posting on Facebook. Hurts growth of the channel, but feels like the right thing to do. I want to be sensitive to the reality we're living in. Our channel is about bringing us together through greater awareness of who we are and hopefully a recognition of how connected we are. The more aware we are, the better choices we make. That's the power of knowledge. Many of us, however, are not ready to hear a different story. A story that contradicts centuries of societal and cultural tradition. But for those of us who feel the time of knowing is now, let's fearlessly journey into the spaces that lead us to the best truth we can find. If you know someone who may be ready to join us, please consider sharing the videos. I appreciate each and every one of you, and thank you for joining me on this most extraordinary journey. Today, Sabrina and Lucas fly us deep into the Sumerian version of the biblical Garden of Eden and the Great Flood. Strap in and let's fly deep. Last time here, we covered the Anunnaki's arrival on Earth 445,000 years ago, their search for gold, the revolt of the Igigi workforce that was established to mine the gold, and the decision to create a primitive worker to relieve the Igigi of the labor-intensive work.
The first group of 50 visitors to Earth arrived about 450,000 years ago, splashing down in the Persian Gulf. They were led by Enki, who was a brilliant scientist. The Anunnaki came to Earth looking for gold.
It's interesting to note that in describing the rivers flowing out of the Garden of Eden, the Holy Bible mentions gold as early as the 2nd chapter of Genesis, specifically in Genesis 2:11 through 12.
The name of the first is Expulsion. It winds through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. Aromatic resin and onyx are also there.
The Anunnaki leadership, Anu, Enlil, and Enki, assigned the tasks of agriculture and mining the gold to the lesser Igigi.
The Igigi declared,
"Every single one of us declared war. We have put a stop to the digging. The load is excessive. It is killing us."
Ea made his voice heard and spoke.
"Let us create a mortal man, so that he may bear the yoke, the work of Enlil. Let man bear the load of the gods.
I shall make a purification by washing. Then one god should be slaughtered. Then a god and a man will be mixed together in clay. Let a ghost come into existence from the god's flesh. And let the ghost exist so as not to forget the slain god."
All of that brings us to the Sumerian descriptions of the biblical Garden of Eden and the Great Flood. Sabrina and Lucas will lead us through this alternative narrative taken from the Atrahasis and other cuneiform tablets discovered in the mid-1800s in the area we now call Iraq. We are still finding additional text and tablets across the globe, almost every day.
Hello, I am Lucas. I'll be joining Sabrina as co-host for today. Let's pick up from where we left off in our last video. The decision to create a primitive worker to relieve the Agigi of their back-breaking drudgery. In the Mesopotamian versions of the creation story, it is Enki, the chief scientist, who suggests the genetic engineering to create an earthing to serve as the primitive worker. Therefore, it had to be Enki whom the Bible quotes as saying,
"Let us make the atom in our likeness and after our image."
In this verse from Genesis 1:26, we take careful note of the words us and our. These words imply more than one.
As a master biologist, Enki's emblem was that of the entwined serpents, representing the double helix DNA. Using and modifying genetic code of an Earth hominid with that of an Anunnaki, Enki brought about the Adam. The first successful attempt produced hybrid males and females that could not sexually procreate. Subsequent attempts, which is where the biblical story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden picks up, were successful in producing a Homo sapiens species that could reproduce.
Translation of languages plays an important role in interpreting ancient history. It will be a theme throughout our journey. In the biblical account of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, it is a serpent that triggers their acquisition of knowing by convincing Eve to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Knowing is the biblical term for sexual procreation. The Hebrew term for serpent is Nahash. Nahash stems from the same root as the Hebrew word for copper, Nehoset. It was a Nahash Nehoset, a copper serpent, an emblem of Enki, that Moses fashioned and held up to stop an epidemic that was affecting the Israelites during the Exodus from Egypt.
Ninma, also known as Nintu, Ninurta, or Ninharsag in different Mesopotamian texts, was Enki's half-sister, daughter of Anu and a consort. She was a mother goddess known for her role as Mami, mother of life. Together with Enki, she extracted the genes of a young member of the Nephilim, the biblical term for Anunnaki, and fused these genes into the egg of a captured female hominid. They then implanted the fertilized egg into the ovum of a female Nephilim.
There was trial and error, and many imperfect beings resulted. Some of the beings created were missing limbs, had too many limbs or had two heads, deformed organs, or any number of genetic defects. Eventually, a perfect model of man was achieved. Thereafter, fertilized eggs were implanted in batteries of Nephilim females. Adams and Eves were thus created, the first Homo sapiens. Ninma got so good at genetic modification that she bragged she could make the new being as perfect or imperfect as she liked.
How good is a man's body? As my heart prompts me, I can make its fate good or bad.
The newly created Homo sapiens were immediately put to work in the mines of southern Africa. But Enlil also needed a supply of the new creatures to work the fields of the Orchard of Eden in Mesopotamia. Enki had an idea.
At this point, we should note that throughout Sumerian texts, it becomes apparent that Enki, firstborn of Anu, held an internal grievance over the fact that his brother Enlil was the designated heir to the throne. The rift was surely intensified when Enlil was given command of Earth, even though Enki was first to pioneer the planet. This rift between brothers would ripple throughout generations of their offspring.
We should also note here that when the Anunnaki Council of 12 agreed to allow Enki to create a primitive worker, it was decided that these new beings would require wisdom, but would not be allowed to procreate, nor should they be granted eternal life, such as that of the gods. Enlil was insistent on these limitations. He was extremely concerned that these new beings would not have the capacity to ever challenge the gods. Eternal life for the gods was not truly eternal, but their biological cycles are believed to be in parallel to Nibiru's 3,600-year orbital period. Based on the Sumerian kings list, many Anunnaki deities lived for thousands of Earth years.
Once the first humans were available for work, Enlil needed the new creatures to work the fields of the Orchard of Eden in Mesopotamia. Knowing this first version of the new creatures could not procreate, Enki saw his chance to gain a new ally on Earth and antagonize Enlil. This new ally would be Homo sapiens.
As the biblical serpent, Enki was the god who further manipulated man genetically to enable him to procreate. The biblical Hebrew to know meant to copulate for the purpose of having offspring. Having attained the fruit of knowing, Adam knew his wife Eve, and she bore him Cain. Wholly enraged, Enlil expelled them from the Garden of Eden, the abode of the gods. In the Hebrew version of Genesis, it was Yahweh, translated as the Lord in the King James Version, that expelled Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. Is the Hebrew Yahweh the Sumerian Enlil?
Mankind, now banished from the Garden of Eden and the care of the gods, took with it the knowledge it acquired: sheep raising, farming, and metallurgy. There were cities built by Cain and his lineage east of Mesopotamia, but a series of murders doomed this line of mankind. A purer line was started by another of Adam's sons, Seth, and in the days of his descendant Enosh, mankind was permitted to return to the land of the gods. It was then that temples, worship, and priesthood started.
In both the words of Genesis and its Sumerian origins, when mankind was permitted to return to the land of the gods, it was then that the sons of gods, the Agigi, began to cohabit with the daughters of man. Enlil was enraged by the defilement of the gods' racial purity. He saw his chance to rid the earth of mankind. A new ice age was developing on Earth some 75,000 years ago, and the climate became drier and harsher. Crops failed. There was hunger, and Enlil decreed that food be withheld from the earthlings. Enki, however, having established a relationship with his creation, and never missing an opportunity to antagonize Enlil, secretly helped mankind, mostly with fish of the sea. But the hunger spread. There was cannibalism. Mankind was decimated, but not finished.
As the gods were letting mankind perish, about 13,000 years ago, their scientific center in the southern hemisphere reported that the ice sheet over the Antarctic continent was beginning to shift, gliding on its own slush. Also, at this time, the planet Nibiru was on its way back into the solar system. As Nibiru neared Earth, its gravitational pull would give the ice sheet its final jolt. It would slip into the ocean, creating a massive tidal wave that would engulf the Earth. It should be noted here that our scientists today are extremely concerned about the receding Thwaites ice sheet in the Antarctic. They call it the Doomsday Glacier, and its collapse would cause a 10-foot or greater rise in global sea levels.
Although the gods agreed at council to keep the coming calamity a secret from mankind, Enki once again frustrates the plan by revealing the secret to a faithful earthling called Ziusudra, the biblical Noah. Enki shows Ziusudra how to build a submersible vessel. Knowing the Anunnaki plans to leave the Earth, Enki instructs him to seal the vessel from within when the sky is lit by the rising spacecraft at the spaceport to the north. He is to navigate the vessel to Ararat, the same mountain on which the biblical Noah landed his ark.
The more we hear from the Sumerians themselves, the more obvious it becomes that much of the biblical Old Testament was derived from Sumerian texts. As we continue this journey, we'll find Sumerian stories in holy books and indigenous tales across the globe. Many of us who first hear these Sumerian tales may feel that they are an attack on our most sacred and treasured holy books, particularly those of the Abrahamic religions of the Western Hemisphere. But is it really an attack? I think not. The Sumerian text came first, thousands of years first. And as such, the Sumerian tablets, text, and cylinder seals actually help validate stories of the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah. Not so much as stories of God, however, but as some of the most important historical documents we have. Zecharia Sitchin believed strongly in the accuracy of the Bible. He thought, however, that much of it has been translated and interpreted with an emphasis on telling a story of God and worship, rather than through a lens of historical documentation. If Mr. Sitchin is correct, it has had a significant impact on our understanding of who we are. In the story of the Garden of Eden, for example, Enlil does not hold the essence of the loving, divine creator of the cosmos that we've heard the Christ speak of. Enlil seems more like an authoritative colonizer. Yet it appears it is his character the biblical story assigns to Yahweh in the Hebrew scriptures and to the Lord in the King James scriptures. Are we worshiping a colonizer? Even more pressing, is there an ET layer to the governance of Earth? And what about the snake? In the Sumerian version, it was the snake that liberated us, told us we could be all we could be. That's a hard pill to swallow after centuries of being told the snake is the evil one. Most of us recognize the precarious situation we find ourselves living through on planet Earth today. We've lost confidence in both local and global governance. The consciousness that built these outdated systems on incomplete science and false assumptions has brought us to this point. Their collapse is inevitable, and as new systems struggle to be born, what those new systems will be is largely up to our collective consciousness. A greater awareness of who we are has never been more important than it is today. In the next video, we'll see what the Sumerians have to say about events immediately following the Great Flood and as far forward towards today as a 20-minute video will allow. Until then, remember, there's a magnificent existence going on, and we are not victims of it, we are participants in it, co-creators of our experience. Love is the fundamental force of creation, so let's keep a smile in our hearts and share it with the world. Thanks for watching. Namaste.